Welcome to the first episode of Frequency. I'm Jenny Field.
And I'm Chuck Ghost. And Jenny, I want to first off say thank you. It is an honor and a privilege to begin this journey with you. And also thank you for not ignoring my DMs about doing this podcast together.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I did say, it's a conversation we started at the end of 2024, I think, when you said, I really want to kickstart a podcast with someone who's equally opinionated and not afraid of having some real conversations about the stuff we really need to talk about in internal comms, HR and leadership. And did I know anyone? And I thought either you're asking for some advice or this is your roundabout way of asking me. And I was like, yeah, I definitely know someone. Me.
And I think it's not that I'm looking for a fight, Jenny. However, if it happens, it happens.
It's fine. My gloves are off. I'm good. I'm here for it either way.
Well, again, thank you for doing this. I think we're on to something really special that we can contribute to. And honestly, like we said, kind of kickstart and ignite conversations that we want to see other people having out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. But we're going to kick off, I think, with just a little bit of a chat about us. There's a lot of people listening that don't really know us, and I'd love to hear what's been on your mind or what you've been up to in the last week, really. What's been going on for you?
Well, selfishly, I want to point out, we literally survived tornadoes last night where we live outside of Indianapolis. So thankfully, everything is all good here.
Good.
But more on a positive note, and to get very personal, in life, there are these certain rites of passage that we have. And as a parent of two kids, you have different rites of passage that they experience that you once experienced. And it was really cool to be able to give my son his first car. And I think we can all remember or imagine what that first taste of freedom is like. It's like when a kid gets their first bike times whatever exponential you want to throw out there. And it's also interesting what people's first car, like his is a classic used Honda Civic, which I feel like is like the perfect, like stereotypical first car for all of the right reasons. So he's obviously very excited. I'm excited for him. He's a great driver. Again, it's that freedom and power that you have with the first car, but also just an immense amount of responsibility with that first vehicle. I assume, Jenny, because I've seen it, not just heard stories about people driving in the UK.
It's true, we do.
What you do, not that y'all invented it or anything. We'll take credit for that. However, what was your first car?
My first car was a Ford Fiesta, and it was dark green. And I still remember the number plate because the last three letters were JWR, and my maiden name is Weller. So in my head, it was Jenny Weller Rules as the end of the number plate.
Well done.
But yeah, I think it was Honda Civic. Loads of people had that. Ford Escorts. Yeah, anything that was just fairly cheap to be able to run around in. Had a good sound system. That was always important. And yeah, fairly compact, so you weren't sort of crashing into anyone. That's super exciting. I love that. It's so funny how you can always remember your first car. What was your first car?
So it sounds way cooler than it really was. I got to warn you on this, Jenny. My first car was a 1967 Pontiac Tempest, which at the time was sort of labeled as like the poor man's GTO, was sort of how it was described then. But it was actually quite selfish from my father, who gifted me that car, because ultimately it was also his car. And it tended to disappear from the driveway on the weekends when he and my mom would go out. So yes, technically that was my first car, but I feel like it was also his car as well. Yeah. It all worked out. Did you ever
just go out to drive it and it was just gone and you were like, okay, I guess I'll get the bus?
It just wasn't there.
Love that. Well, let's kick off our conversation this week. What have you got on your mind or your agenda that's been in the news going on around internal comms, HR, leadership, culture? What's going on?
And all of the above. And this is very much what we want this podcast to be about, is a take of things that we're seeing that's impacting the world of comms and HR and employee experience and all of those things that we want to talk about and we want all of you to talk about. The first, Jenny, is you recently wrote on LinkedIn reviewing 10 years of the state of the sector, produced by Gallagher. And one, I want to go back to see, like, this is going to be a very American-centric view, but let's just go back to 2015. Let's just see what this was like. So Barack Obama was president of the United States. Insert long pause for us all to reflect on how great that time was. Uptown Funk was a song from Bruno Mars that was sort of in our ears all the time. Hamilton had just shown up on there. And so part of what I'm curious about is, even going back to 2015 comms world, it was Yammer debates were happening. And that's even probably for us, Jenny, dating ourselves for some of the newer comms pros out there who may not even, maybe you've heard of it, you don't know what it is. But at the time, back in the day, Yammer was pretty legendary. Shocker, back in 2015, people were complaining about email overload. We made tremendous progress on that. But then now today, 10 years later, like hybrid work, AI, we're still talking about the effects of the pandemic because of how legendary that was on the industry. But still so many things unresolved out there throughout the 10 years. And for those of us that have been in this industry that long. So what were some of your other takeaways or thoughts on what you reviewed over that 10-year period?
So it was interesting because there's loads of comments on that article about whether it's a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of approach. And for me, those 10 years have shown a real shift in the industry in terms of what the industry or the profession or the sector, whatever you want to call it, what it wants to be. And I think that has probably been the biggest shift, is there's this very clear, we want to be this sort of function. We want to be advising at a senior level. We want to be doing this. But the action isn't always there to follow that. And I think that's probably the thing that stood out for me in those 10 years, is some of the things that are still an issue today, like manager enablement and leadership visibility. Those are still an issue in 10 years. That hasn't really changed at all. If anything, it's kind of gone backwards a bit. And these are things that for me are so key to the success of communication and culture, yet they have continued to be in that kind of too hard box. So it's like, we know we need to do it and we still talk about it, but the action isn't following. It's the same with measurement. The reports are showing a shift in recognizing it has to link to business outcomes, but the action isn't always there. That said, there's been significant action in a lot of other places, but those are two things for me that I think come up so much in the work I do with clients that it's still a frustration. Like, we should be able to be moving this forward now.
There's an interesting word that you mentioned that I don't know that you would even think it was interesting, but as soon as you said it, it was the word want. We communicators want to be this, but then you can't just cross your fingers and know that other people know those things. Like, is this an element of communicators not advocating for themselves enough? Is this an element of communicators not stepping into the conversation and waiting for the conversation to happen? You get to work with a lot of organizations out there. Like, what do you see? Why has it not been fast enough? Why has it been slow?
Yeah, and do you know what? It's something I come back to again and again, because why are we still having this conversation? You and I say this all the time. Why are we still having these same conversations? I think there's a couple of things. The one thing for me, which I've been saying for probably the last 10 years, is we haven't done enough to educate business leaders about what communication can do inside an organization. I think we spend a lot of time talking to ourselves in conferences and events, and that's hugely helpful, right? There's a lot of benefit from doing that, but I don't think we've spent enough time trying to find everyone else in organizations to explain to them what communication can do, and we're just kind of expecting them to know what that is. The challenge with that is that every organization has different expectations and different experiences of communication, employee experience. They're all different. You can go from one organization to another, and in one organization it's a strategic function advising the leadership team, but also organizing events and maybe also doing some of the content. And in another one it's purely digital and you're not talking to the leadership team at all, but you're just about the content and the channels. It's so different everywhere, which makes it really hard to get that traction around what is it we're really here to do. But it's that education of others. I say to people a lot, you can't expect leaders and other people to understand how to communicate effectively, because we have learned how to do this. We know how to do it with all the right channels and stuff, but we just kind of assume and then get frustrated when people don't. I don't know how much of a safe space to fail we create for our stakeholders to learn and understand. And I think that's the challenge. I think it's a combination of a bit of skills gaps in the comms world and a gap of understanding in the leadership world. And we're in a real mess at the moment, I think, with that. What do you think? You've spent a lot of time with different organizations. Is it any different over there than it is to the people I'm chatting to more over here?
I think there's a lot of similarity. I equate it more to, or here's where I would like to see communicators take this, is look to partner with leaders on things, work to partner and establish that credibility with them. We have said we are not going to talk about getting a seat at the table and all of that kind of stuff that we are all tired of hearing, but build a partnership with the leaders. Like, be that advocate for them, be that influencer for them, be that voice for them, and build that partnership and build that trust and alignment with them. Then you will get what you want. You will, whether it's a budget, headcount, a tool, whatever it is, they're never going to say, Jenny, you're my trusted advisor. They're not going to say that. You're just going to become that.
Yeah.
And you become that by building trust with them and doing work with them, not just waiting for them to come to you, but building that partnership. The communicators that I see that are the most successful are the ones that have built partnerships with not just leaders throughout the organization. That to me is the easiest path to success for communicators.
Yeah, it's the relationships, isn't it? I think this is the thing that is harder in a post-pandemic world for a lot of people, where it's hybrid or remote. People are saying it's harder to build relationships. I spoke to one communications team where the internal comms manager was saying, I have a really difficult relationship with the chief of staff. And I said, well, how often are you in the London office with them? And they said, oh no, I'm home based. My face probably gave it away, because I was like, I think this might be where the challenge is, because I appreciate that you're home based, but if you want to fix this relationship, something's got to be different, and you probably want to fix that relationship more than the chief of staff. So you're going to have to do something different to get a different outcome, right? Rather than just saying, well, I work at home, so that's it. Like, I think, and this is the whole, if we want change, we've got to do something differently. You can't just keep doing the same thing and expecting something to happen, because it's just never going to do that. But I do think this whole return.
Did you just paraphrase an Einstein quote?
I think I did. I think you did.
I think you did. All
right, I won't claim it as my own.
Let's move along. Let's move along to the next thing I want to talk about today. I thought this was, to me, this is interesting. To other people, maybe not. But let's get into this. There is a survey that came out that, this is in the U.S. 1/3 of U.S. managers say they prefer using AI over hiring Gen Z employees. Now, this could point to a lot of different things. Let's get into some of these. Is it friction and generational friction in workspaces? Is there even a generational element to it, of priorities of younger people coming into the workplace? I mean, guess what? It happens with every generation that young people come into the workplace. So I don't know why this is a shocker every time young people want a workplace. So what do you attribute this to? When I shared this with you, Jenny, and it said that 1/3 would prefer AI over a human person at work, what was your response?
Genuinely, my response was, I can kind of see that. Because, I mean, we've just made some changes in our business where we're no longer using people for stuff and we're using AI for stuff. And that's not a generational shift. It's more, actually, I can do this a different way. I think it's a great headline, but I think it also comes down to two things. It comes down to the sort of tasks we're doing in organizations and the overwhelming volume of tasks that have become work since the pandemic. And the second thing, I think, is that we aren't very good at having difficult conversations at work. So where we have moved to a more remote or hybrid environment, our relationships are impacted, so we're not as connected. So that human piece is missing, which means that when people have questions or they want to ask something or they want to challenge something, that's become quite an attack. Whereas actually, people are well within their rights to ask questions and challenge stuff. Like that's human nature. But it's become a really negative thing. And like, we've kind of gone back to that, just do what I say I need you to do and don't ask me questions. And I think that's probably why a robot is more appealing in some cases, because it might ask questions, but it does it in a way that maybe feels more acceptable and I'm more open to that. And it's not challenging something that feels like a personal attack. So that's my sort of take on it. What was yours?
This is probably getting into the semantics a bit of the language that they use.
You getting into semantics of things?
Into the
Never.
semantics. I love semantics land. I think there's an element of managers don't know how to lead anymore. They're truly just managing. Mm-hmm. It's easy to say, oh, I can just have this AI tool just do what I need it to do, instead of actually working with someone and getting them aligned. We talk about alignment all the time in comms, like getting them aligned and understanding where they're coming from and having them contribute and all of that. And I actually think for this 1/3 of people, it's a little bit of a cop-out. It's a little, this isn't comms managers. This is managers across the business. So this is, if you're in a comms leadership role, these are your peers in engineering or purchasing or health and safety, whatever it is. 1/3 of them would rather just use an AI tool than hire a real human being. To me, it feels like a cop-out of not wanting to build and coach and lead people.
But is that because no one's told people what's expected of them as a leader? So I asked a question on LinkedIn a while ago, which is there like a playbook or a guide in your organization of what it is to be a leader or to line manage, like what that looks like in your organization? And I think around 80% of people said no, and it's not on our list to do, which surprises me in the current climate. But I think I see what you're saying about like, it's like a bit of a cop out, but if no one's told you what it means to be a manager or a leader, and all you're seeing is more time needed to go on something, then the opportunity to not spend time on that because no one's helped me understand why that's important is probably quite appealing. Now, I know it should be a given that you should know how important that is and you should know what it means to be a manager and a leader, but it's not. Like, it isn't at all. And I think that it's just seen as more time and more task without understanding why that's important.
I wonder too if it comes down to, again, I really promised I would try to leave my jerk hat off on these episodes. However, there's an element, if you have to be told how to lead, are you a leader? If you have to be told how to manage, are you a manager? Like, is that just where like people get promoted because we're going to come back to the word want. They want to be a manager. They want to be a leader. Great. Maybe you need to be taught those things. But I also think there's people out there who that is just who they are. They don't have to read the playbook. They don't have to read the handbook to know, oh, this is how you lead a team. This is how you lead an organization. And we probably see that. It's one of those things you see. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. When you see those people who are just natural leaders and natural managers and get the team involved and get people going in the right direction, like you see that. And the ones that are struggling, are they just not suited for it?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, you have got your jerk hat on there a little bit. So, you can build all the skills to be a leader, but there are people that are naturally better at it than others. But there's also a lot required to be a really good leader. And as someone who's probably I have been on that journey, I know that when I first managed somebody, I really probably wasn't very good. I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't sure how to give them enough space to do stuff while also making sure we got stuff done. There was definitely stuff I didn't do well. And over the years and learning, I've got much better at that in terms of how to do that. And that is experience and time. I always joke that there'll be people that will look at the books I've written and be like, sure, she's written that book. Because they remember me from like 20 years ago. But that's growth, right? I'm taking that. But I think, no, you can definitely build it. And I think if you've got a desire to be a manager and a desire to be a leader, then it is your duty to learn what are the skills and things involved in doing that. And I think it's also, to your point, it's recognizing that it is a skill. And I think if you just think you're either good at it or you're not, you'll never learn it. Whereas I think we have to recognize that actually that is quite a skill, to be able to lead and manage people so they follow you and you're all going in the same direction. That is something we should invest in and learn, I think.
One thing I don't want us to do, though, is cop out to the generational element.
Oh,
I think
no,
it's
I'm
easy
a big...
to point to that.
Yeah.
I think we all know, I think it's been established that Gen X is the strongest, best generation out there. We are the glue holding the world together. The most accepting of all generations. I'm just speaking on behalf of Gen X. So I don't think it's a generational thing. I think that's the cop out for me.
Yeah.
Is that I don't want to mess with this that's come on.
Yeah. And the thing I'm trying to find at the moment is where people say this generation is the most stressed. I'm like, well, where's the research of previous generations at that age for a comparison about how stressed that generation was at that age versus this do you know what I mean? Because I think otherwise it's not comparable. And how do you know? Because if they're more stressed compared to other generations, that's a different thing. But actually, if everyone, when they are in that age bracket of, say, mid-20s, no matter who we are now, when we're at that age, you're the most stressed in life because it's such a significant shift in how you make friends, how you do stuff, all of those things, then that's different. But I did my diploma paper on generational theory and what that would mean for work. And in that, I thought you can't really group the whole world together based on a time period and say everyone here has got exactly the same characteristics. Because even though we're saying that Gen Z are the digital natives, they grew up with technology, I'm not entirely sure how true that is for the whole world when there's a lot of digital poverty out there, and that's often something we don't talk about. So I'm with you on I don't like the generational sweeping statements. I don't think it's helpful. I think it's a massive label that leaves us able to excuse things which, quite frankly, shouldn't be excused.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next news item. If we had a big budget, Jenny, I would challenge this next one because I would love to right now play Sabotage by Beastie Boys. But unfortunately, a lot of people may not know this. The Beastie Boys are actually quite litigious. They will come after you. So just everyone hum Sabotage as we're reading this, and that way we don't get in trouble with the Beastie Boys. There is this report out, 31% of employees are actively sabotaging company AI efforts and initiatives. Let's think about this. Communicators claim they're not good at math. I call BS on that. So, but we're gonna trim this down. This is a third of your employee base. A third are actively sabotaging AI efforts and initiatives. Not ignoring, not lukewarm to, sabotaging these efforts, which I find that such a fascinating word. They're not resisting AI. They're sabotaging AI. Jenny, where do you think this comes from? Or is this just a sexy word to use?
Well, so what are they doing to be sabotaging it? I suppose that, I don't think the article goes into that level of detail, but are they just unplugging it? Or what are they doing? I think that's how do you sabotage? I have no idea how they're doing that. But this is the story of any tech. So when we were talking about this before we were recording, I was like, I'm going to go and have a look and see what happened when email came in, right? Because And it was not, I don't think there was sabotage. I don't think it was quite that
Do you
bad.
want me to tell you what happened when email came in, Jenny? Because I was alive then. You don't have to just go read about it.
I was also alive, but I was not at work. So I was like, what happened at work? And it said like people didn't understand why they would waste time typing when they could just pick up the phone, or they didn't see the value in it. It was, people were very against it. For me, it's any tech change, and I've done so many in organisations. I've had people crying when we've changed email providers. I've had all sorts. It's a significant change. And the challenge, I think, with AI is people don't really know what it's going to be able to do to help us. So they're just a bit scared. Whereas something like email was very clear, this is what it's for. Whereas I think kind of the possibilities of AI is what makes it quite daunting. And therefore, I can't even look at that because it's so massive. So I'm not going to do it. Is what I kind of think's going on. But the word sabotage I find is so interesting because I have got images of people just going around and I know that's not how AI works, but it's just like, what are they doing?
Well, it's an interesting perspective because, to your point, there's always been any type of change. There's going to be resistance. This is clear. This is not just resistance. And so then I'm wondering, like, is it about sort of that early narrative about AI being like, almost like it's coming for your job. It's going to eliminate these things that you do. And there's always been elements of technology and progress that it's the paradox out there is like, as technology gets better, as processes get better, there's always been this fear of like, oh no, that's going away. But sometimes it just creates more opportunities. So I think it's this narrative that got built early on around AI replacing instead of AI augmenting. Whereas email did replace a lot of things.
It did.
Like there were people who typed memos.
Yeah.
Typed newsletters, all of these things that happen, and now all of a sudden email. Now, again, I can remember when you had to build a business case at your work as to why they should give you an email address. It wasn't just something that was just handed out willy-nilly. It was like you had to explain why, because they then had to manage it because data costs a lot of money then and servers cost a lot. I mean, all those costs have come down. Now I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to build a business case as to why I shouldn't have an email address or why I don't want an email address. So I think I attribute it to this narrative of AI being a threat instead of it being this, how can it help us? What can it help us do? Where can it actually help us grow and learn? Instead of it being, it's coming for my job.
Yeah. And you've just reminded me actually, when you were saying there were people that lost their jobs when email came in, I just remember talking to my nan, my grandmother, the other week, and she used to be a courier for British Airways. So she would get on planes with documents and then take them to other countries and then pick up documents and get on planes. And that was her job, was going and doing that, which, I mean, she's 96 now, so she obviously doesn't do it anymore. But that was her, and that job just would never exist today, really, because you don't need to do that. I think you're right. I think the fear is part of it. But I also think we have a duty to almost embrace that fear and learn. And I think if we just run away from it, that's not particularly helpful. I also do think that, I mean, I was very fortunate to have some time with a guy called Ronsley Vaz recently, who took me through a load of AI stuff and how to use it for my business and what to do. And that was hugely helpful because it was very specific for me and has allowed me to make a lot of changes. But I think prior to that, I'd been to loads of events and conferences and seen loads of presentations, and none of that made anything any clearer to me about what you could do with it. It's like people just jumped on this bandwagon and want to talk about it, but no one's going, this is the prompt I gave it. This is then what happened. Then it did. No one's breaking it down necessarily into like that, which I think is what a lot of people need in order to understand how to use it. But I think people sabotaging probably says more about your culture than anything else.
That's probably true. There's some other stat that I read that it was around like 98% of people are using AI. They don't know.
Well, yeah,
that they are. Like if you watch Netflix and it's serving
yeah.
up shows for you, there's not someone on the back end thinking, Jenny really liked this one show, or Jenny stopped this one show and then put a thumbs down. Well, let's actually take that out. No. So we're using it just because it's not being called out. And I think I wonder if that's an area that companies are going to get into, is not saying this is AI driven, not
Yeah.
saying this is AI. It's more just sort of happening in front of you without
Yeah.
you having to manage it or worry about it.
And I think there is this, it's been made this sort of massive thing, but you're right. We've actually been using it as a tool for a long time. Even if you think about using Siri on your phone to do, like, that's been around for a long
Grammarly.
time.
People using
Yeah,
Grammarly.
there's loads, and I think it's morphed into this big, horrible, scary thing. But I also don't know. It's interesting you said 98% of people are using it, but we don't realise we're using it. Whereas I think for organisations, I think it's really low in terms of how many people are actually using it, because it's like we don't know how to use it, and it's a huge change in terms of your organisational operation, all of it. Like there's a lot in there to think about.
What and this I will say from a leadership standpoint, I'm seeing, and this is my knee jerk reaction to it. It seems like about half of organizations out there, there's no policy whatsoever.
No.
It's the Wild West around AI. And so there's people like me who would be like, sweet, let's go. And other people are like, wait, there's no guardrails. Like, I might get in trouble for this. I could get fired if I don't know. There's no one
Yeah.
saying what can happen or not happen. So there's that side of the world. Then the other side is it's banned.
Yeah.
No one can touch it. We're watching every keystroke you do. And if you type in Chat GPT, you're fired. As we know, there's a middle ground there. Like, people want guidance. They don't want to lose
Yeah.
their job because they're using it. But also, if your company is not providing education and they're just flat out banning it, and your employees are falling behind, or they're using shadow AI, which means they're doing it on their phone off the side of their desk,
Yeah.
and then taking screenshots or typing what they're seeing. So they are, even if you've banned it, they're still using it. And so it's that sweet spot in the middle of understanding it's here, it's going to happen. So not that you have to be like full on embrace it, we're an AI company, but give your employees some simple guidance. Here are
Yeah.
the tools you need to use. Here's why it's safe. Here, please do not upload company financial data unless it's the enterprise. Like, give people some guidelines, or else people are going to fall into one of those
Yeah.
two buckets.
But then as soon as you started talking about kind of governance and guidelines, all I could think about was, but people don't do that for internet platforms and digital workplace. Like there's so
They
many of those
should.
that get launched without that stuff. So actually,
None that I ever worked on.
well, yeah, well, not everyone's as good as you, are they?
Well, let's end the show right there, Jenny.
Dear, have we got anything else from the news this week?
There's one last item, which might be the perfect summary to what we've just talked about here today. AP News, so trusted source out there, employees are saying time and time again, they don't know what's expected of them. There's unclear roles, unclear expectations. Are we hybrid? Are we not? Are we remote? Are we not? One company that remote work is more productive. Another one says, no, everybody has to be in the office and then you're more productive. And people are like, no, hybrid is more productive. And it feels like employees are playing hot potato out there of like, who are we? What are we? Who am I in this organization? It feels like everything's sort of gotten thrown up in the air and it's 52 card pickup now. And so how are communicators then going to be successful, or are they the key to success in helping provide that signal, going back to our frequency comment, to provide that
Nice.
signal through the noise of people at least understanding where they fit and what's expected of them?
Is this a new problem? Like I don't know that it's a new problem that people don't know what's expected of them, because I think that for the last 5 years at least, people probably haven't really known. I think, to our earlier conversation in this, that role of being a manager and a leader, majority of people I talk to, whether they're friends or whether they're people that I'm working with as a consultant, they don't always have objectives. They don't know when their appraisals are. They don't have any conversations about their development. Like they've got no idea. So if those things aren't happening, people will never know what's expected of them at that kind of sort of micro level for their role. I don't think leaders and organizations really know what they want to do with this return to office hybrid stuff anyway, because
That's crystal clear.
that is chaos at the moment. And for me, that comes from this lack of clarity around these are our values, this is our culture. And I always say start there, depending on what your values and culture are, then build from that. Does being in the, like, what makes sense then for how you operate based on those? And I think that isn't clear. Like, it's just all messy. And I think that no one knows what's expected. I kind of wonder if it goes all the way through the organisation. Actually, we're all going, actually, no, none of us know. Anyone know? Anyone? No, none of us know. It's kind of where I think we are.
To the AP's credit, their point was it is increasingly unclear. So it's only getting worse. So I'm gonna put the blame on leadership on this one. And here's why. Because in my opinion, leaders lead, doers do. Yeah. I think we've got a lot of leaders are doing. People need their leaders to lead the organization. They need them to be that voice, not get everyone in line, not from a trouble standpoint, but provide the path. Here's the direction we're going. Here's why we're going in that direction, and provide that path to people. That's what I see leaders not doing. It's a little bit of lasers and cats. It feels like right now where leaders, like, I don't know who's shooting the lasers, but the cats are sort of going after it. The companies I see that are being successful, it's a bit cliche to talk about, but they have strong leaders who have a established vision. It's not wishy-washy. It's not this quarter it's this, and next quarter it's this, and third quarter this. It's that this is our plan. This is who we are. This is where we're heading. Got it? Good. And I feel like that trickle down, cascade, whatever word you want to use, that does make a difference to people. It's very clear to them what we're all doing. And I think that's missing in a lot of organizations.
So I agree with you as someone who talks a lot about leadership credibility, having a visionary practice, being able to talk about where you're going, massively important for people to follow you. What I will say is I don't think it's entirely a leadership issue. I think it's like 95% that. But there is something about employees at different levels in organizations where we forget that we do often have agency over what we're doing. And I think that we're falling into, again, this is based on conversations I've been having, but I feel like we can fall into a trap of what I call like a silent veto. So we go to stuff and then we moan about it afterwards, or we agree to it and then we say we don't outside the room. And I see that happening a lot. Like, I don't know why I should have to go to this meeting, so I'm going to go, but I'm going to turn my camera off. Or I don't understand, why this has gone wrong, but I'm not going to set up a meeting to talk. Like, there's just stuff where I feel like you can get hold of this. Like, if you want to not go to that meeting, then have the conversation and ask why you're being invited and then make the decision. Or if something's gone wrong, then book the meeting and have the conversation. It's like we've lost this ability to have control over some of that. And I know for some people that might be linked to confidence, or they might not feel they're at that level in an organisation. But at every level in an organisation I've worked in, if something's happened where I think that isn't okay, then I've always felt like that's my responsibility to address that or say to that person, this doesn't really work for me, can we do it like this? And there's different ways of doing that, but I do feel like we've forgotten that we can do that a little bit. Like, we're all looking up. And there's only so much looking up can do, that I think that's a little bit out of balance. So yes, 95% there, but we do have a responsibility as well to have control over what we're doing.
And I think there's, from my viewpoint, there's an element where I do think the pandemic had a little bit of an impact on this, where now I think there's a lot of leaders, and we see it in their commentary and in return to office communication, where they feel like they need to seize control of the organization. And leadership is not about control. And I think that's the mistake that I'm seeing, is that these leaders feel like they now have to seize control of, I'm now in charge of you. You work for me. That was not where the message was heading pre-pandemic. And I think now it's this command and control approach that some leaders, not all, some leaders are taking, those are the ones that are getting the headlines. And unfortunately, sometimes the headlines don't speak the reality of all organizations. But that then, again, becomes the narrative. It becomes this is how all companies are behaving. We know that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Is there anything else on your list for us to talk about this week?
That's it. I think we've covered quite a bit. We know it's chaotic out there. We know it's challenging out there. Jenni, anything from your side that you're sort of freaking out about this week?
What am I freaking out about this week? The thing that's on my mind this week is the inability of human beings to override policy. So there's some stuff that I've heard in the last sort of week where people have kind of said, well, it's our policy to do this, when human nature would suggest that maybe something different is required. And I feel like when we get to a point where policy or robots cannot be overridden by being a human being and understanding what's needed is where I'm freaking out a little bit, that we've really lost that ability to connect in relationships and human stuff. So that's on my mind this week for sure. How about you?
I think because I'm a very positive person, Jenni, I'm going to take your negative and spin it more positive. I'm freaking out about image generation when OpenAI released their new model for image generation. This is the area of the AI conversation that I want communicators to begin thinking bigger picture around. The things that you can create, and I mean truly create using this, is mind-blowing. Before, like the previous model, if you had to do anything with text, if anybody did this, you knew it was comical. Words would be jumbled and the printer didn't know how to spell things and all of that. All of that is gone. And the ability to create, again, it's all around the prompt, it's all around your clarity, all of those things. It's a reminder to me, I forget who said this to me. If they said it to me, it was on LinkedIn or wherever. The version of AI you're using today is the worst version of itself.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people saying, oh, I tried that once. We know that's not a good way to develop as an individual, is to say, oh, I tried it once and it wasn't very good, so that's it. That was the worst version. So to me, it's completely lifted the lid off of creativity. And what can you create? There are no bounds now in creating images and creating content now, that I think, don't look at AI as like, oh no, it's going to write everything for me. It's not, unless you tell it to write everything for you. But what can it help you now create that you could have basically never provided before? So I encourage everyone, whether you're using ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, whatever it is out there, push the boundaries on it and push it from a personal standpoint, not always work. Try things out on the side personally to see what it can help you do. That's what I'm freaking out about this week.
I love that. And I use Claude quite a lot, and I used it to help me create like a home workout program for some mobility stuff and things. Like I use it for work and personal like stuff to help me be healthier and things like that. I think it's just got so much opportunity. Fabulous. Well, this concludes our very first episode of Frequency, and we'll be back next week with more news, insights, stories, and opinions. We'll put the links in the show notes for all of the articles that you've talked about today.
Before we wrap up, Jenni, I just want to give credit to a friend of the show. I can say that now. We have a show. A friend of the show and a friend of mine, Poet Ali, for lending us the intro music and follow-on music that you hear at the end of the show. Poet is an amazing human being. I don't even know how to describe Poet, which is best to say he is a TEDx speaker, a keynoter. He is a musician. He's a fashion designer. He brings people together in creative ways. So I just want to say thank you, Poet, for lending us your music to do this. And for all of you listening, thank you for coming along this journey with Jenni and I. This is a journey we want to be on with you as we want to increase the conversations that are happening across this weird little internal comms, HR, employee experience space that we're in. So if you like what you hear, please follow Frequency wherever you listen to your podcasts. Give us reviews. We know that may not be the most important thing to you, but it means a lot to us. And if you have any feedback or ideas for Jenni and I, please look for us on LinkedIn. We want to make this a show for the industry, not just a show for us. So if there's topics you want us to talk about, ideas you want to share, maybe you disagree with us, I hope you do, let us know. Thank you for joining us for our very first episode of Frequency.
Thanks, everyone.